Hello YouTube, this is Morgan Airspeed Prime here with my next City of Echoes chapter analysis video. This one is going to be for chapter 6. This is going to be the last of these videos that you will see pre-release of the book officially, which is on the 22nd, just because I feel the first 6 chapters in particular make for a really nice intro to the book, to the point where this is really the chunk of chapters I would have liked them to maybe more like officially release, especially in terms of like the audiobook thing. I really would have liked to have seen like the official Avatar channel do something like where they just put up that first chunk of the audiobook, because it's a great intro into what this book is trying to do. At the end of this chapter, you know kind of exactly sort of where the book is going, and it's just like, what does Jin do to properly get this plot into motion? But the setup is mostly all done after this one. Just before I jump into discussing it in detail, I will mention that I do have YouTube channel membership and Patreon enabled on the channel if you would like to help support. And also, if you come in at the higher tier, you will gain early access to various videos in this series as it progresses forward. But yeah, like I said, this is a really good chapter that to me is the end of the kind of intro to the book, because the plot kind of kicks into gear here. While yes, you do get the explanation for what is like Susu's plan, what is Susu going to do to get the family the bakery back, you learn lots of other stuff as well. Like you do get details like, you know, Jin is an earthbender, and you get some backstory information that's actually quite interesting about Jin and her parents here. I do think this is probably one of the best chapters so far early on in the book. So let's jump in here. So straight away, again, like it's in contrast to like especially say chapter 4, where there's a sense of like, with the stability that Jin and Susu have, things are okay in Ba Sing Se in the lower ring, but now the harsh reality of the lower ring comes into play, and this chapter shows you immediately with the first paragraph. For people like us in the lower ring, everything has a cost. If the officials come to us and tell us to jump, then we have to ask how high. It's the way life works here. Everyone barely clinging to life. And yeah, they all know Susu's plan is going to have to be a risky one. So what we find out quite early on is that basically Susu, along with especially like Grandmother Wen and various other people in the lower ring, have had to kind of basically negotiate this kind of deal that gives the deed of the bakery back to the Wen family. And effectively, it's in exchange for Susu taking a contract in the upper ring. This deal had to be facilitated by this character known as the Judge, who is this kind of merchant, kind of respected person who mediates disputes between like more high up people and then people in the lower ring. So this one kind of went relatively high up, and they had to work it kind of quite quickly, because of course the family can't be without the bakery for days upon days as they sort this out. They kind of need to get the bakery back straight away, which is so unfortunate for, of course, Susu. So yeah, Susu reveals to Jin, I took a contract to work in the upper ring. I leave tomorrow. And yeah, Jin is just stunned by this. I can't believe that this is happening, that they were talking about how they're basically going to be together forever, and now immediately Susu is kind of ripped away from her. They've talked about this before, like the book actually goes into detail on what these kind of contracts are, that like the lucky ones who take these contracts are treated like actual servants, able to earn a pitiful wage, which usually involves working long hours, doing jobs the higher ranked servants wish to avoid. But if you're unlucky, you'll be beaten or abused. And the two of them, Jin and Susu, both promised each other that if they'll never be desperate enough to take a contract, and that they would do anything to help each other escape. But now that the reality is in place, the idea is, does Jin actually have any kind of capacity to do anything to help Susu now that this has actually become real? And at least after this first chapter, the idea is it doesn't seem like it. So what is going to happen? That's the idea. So yeah, Jin is a bit kind of stunned by this. Is Susu okay with this? But Susu accepts that this is the sacrifice she has to make to protect her family. And she tells Jin, like, I'm doing this for her, pointing to her little sister, baby Ming. So that's a nice little moment, but it's still very sad and tragic in the middle of all of this as well, that she has to be basically taken away from the family to make this happen. And again, this is where, Jin, complete change from episode 4. There is never an end to the struggles, exchanging one debtor for another, never getting ahead while we grab at the scraps offered by those in the upper ring, the crumbs they provide for our entertainment, their fashions and their parties and their gossip. Just a complete contrast, showing you the other side of things, that, you can gain a certain stability in the lower ring, but it's never as stable as you think it is. And when it goes wrong, it tends to go really wrong. And it's to the point where, like, Jin is thinking in her head, it's all a lie, the idea that you can do more and stuff like that. Their dreams, in a way, were just dreams from a few chapters ago. And they kind of talk about how, there will be a way to bring you home. The family's telling her that. Jin is telling her that. And then you get the end of this paragraph, and it's like, Susu nods. But I can tell she doesn't quite believe me. Because, again, the reality of this situation. What can the family do? What can Jin do? That's the big question. After this, we kind of cut to, like, the second half of the chapter. And Jin kind of can't really bring herself to go to school because she's so lost in thought about this situation that has completely changed her life. She's just thinking about the whole situation. She reflects a little bit on the schooling situation, that, she has this scholarship there mainly because of how good her calligraphy skills are because of Gong Gong, but how she is behind in a lot of other areas because she comes from the lower ring. So her knowledge of history and the classics is lowish compared to the others. And the idea of, like, does she belong in the school, even though she has this potential to kind of take the kind of calligraphy route through the school? It's like, is that going to help her do anything in this situation? Who knows? She then stops by the Firelight Fountain. So again, you should know this location because this is the location she brings Zuko to on the date in the Tale of Zuko when we get there. And so obviously that's going to happen in a bunch of chapters' time, but we see that it's still an important location to her before this. Now, this is where we kind of double down on one of the retcons that this book does to previously established information, which is that the old Nickelodeon website information tells us that it was this specific fountain in Ba Sing Se where Jin's parents kind of met and became a couple as kids. But this book more goes with the idea, like, no, wait, no, they're refugees, they died as in becoming refugees, they died, meaning Jin and her grandfather are the only ones who come to the city. So that isn't valid. That can't really work. So what they do is they change it so that actually there is a fountain just like this one back in Da Ying, which is the hometown of Jin and her family. And that's the way they kind of keep the core of what that old information was, but make it, like, fit a little bit better. And I think that was definitely the right thing to do overall. They double down on the idea, like, that fountain was also where Mama and Baba had their first kiss. They've constantly told that story to Jin over the years, including the detail that the mother was actually the one who kind of initiated the kiss for the first time. And that's kind of significant because we kind of attach that trait onto Jin in terms of being quite confident on the date with Zuko, of course. And obviously she got it from her mother and how much she has focused on the story of how her parents' kind of relationship got started. So they keep the core of it while changing the details to just fit a little bit better, which I think is perfectly fine overall. The fountain is important, but the logistics over, her and her parents and stuff like that, they had to make some changes. Then we get the really interesting reveal that Jin is an earthbender. Now, this is one of those things where you get to this point in the book and you're like, oh yeah, I've not even asked the question, like, is she or is she not an earthbender? It just never came up because it's not really a part of her life necessarily. And it kind of highlights that idea of, like, yeah, like, people in these positions where they are more just from a normal family, if they are or aren't an earthbender, sometimes, like, it doesn't necessarily matter really. So, like, it's definitely possible for someone to be a bender but never really pursue using their skills. And that definitely seems to be the way Jin is presented here, where she notes that, like, she feels a connection to the earth as she picks up some pebbles. Like it says here, a humming resonance, a type of energy that calls to me, just like the energy of the earth beneath my feet. A tug that I can't quite escape in the still moments like this without the busy bustle of the city to distract me. What she seems to be able to do, given that she's not particularly trained with her earthbending, is mostly just kind of throw pebbles with a little bit more control so that they skip quite nicely, and then she can draw kind of things in the ground with her bending to a certain degree, but she has no particular earthbending skills kind of beyond that. So very, very basic level. We get the reveal that part of why she has like no training in earthbending, is that her mother was an earthbender, and this put her mother at odds with Gong Gong, and because she chose a physical job honing her bending skills over basically something like calligraphy. We get the kind of full backstory here of she fell in love with the scholar from Omashu who was training to be the next village magistrate, so that is Jin's father, and then they had me. But then we get the kind of tragic turn, so the full backstory beginning to come out here. After I was born, she joined the battalion, wanting to help protect the village from the bandits. When the Fire Nation army came, they took out the Earthbenders first in stealth missions, burned them alive, and left their charred corpses for us to discover the next day. My mother was among them. This left the village grieving and defenseless when the rest of the army came in. An easy surrender. That's brutal, just knowing that that's what actually became of Jin's mother. And this is why Gong Gong is very adamant that Jin not pursue anything related to her earthbending, because he fears that she might die in a similar way to the way Jin's mother died. And he's trying to protect her with like the idea that calligraphy is safe. But Jin in her head is also thinking like that being a calligrapher didn't save my father. They both died like kind of back to back because the Fire Nation came in, and that's what happened. Does it matter kind of either way type thing. And that's where Jin is kind of lost in regards to like, what does she do next? Like, does she go down this road to pursue this to pursue this? And regardless of which way she goes, do any of these places get her towards getting Susu back? And right now there doesn't seem to be a pathway, because Jin notes that like, she could theoretically change to like an earthbending school and develop her skills to the point where she could become like a builder or one of the benders who runs the monorail via earthbending, but that would mean that she kind of has to leave Gong Gong behind. And that's not something that she wants to do. So that's not really an option. And they kind of note this. It's an interesting point, kind of connecting like the idea of like her earthbending or lack of earthbending skills with regards to like how useful she feels she is in her ability to do anything to help protect Susu. And it can't. The stones fall, plunging to the bottom of the fountain, as heavy as my mood. So yeah, what is she going to do next? The final scene of the chapter is the goodbye scene with Susu. So as Jin arrives to the Wen family, they're all saying goodbye to her. Then they give time for her to say goodbye to Jin. It's a very sad moment because, especially, Susu's holding her baby sister, of course. She's going to miss her, like, pretty much the most. But she says to Jin, they'll still have you. Promise me you'll take care of them. So, like, it's this kind of really nice moment of just, like, Susu kind of entrusting her family to, her best friend. But to the point where she considers Jin a part of the family as well. So yeah, this is something that Jin can do. Of course, she can help and do what she can to look after her family. And then this is when the carriage arrives, pulled by ostrich horses. Interestingly, they note that there's no upper ring family crest on this carriage. It's painted green and gold. It is a government carriage. So the contract that Susu has taken is to the Ba Sing Se government. Jin even makes the little connection here of that it's somewhat similar to the carriage that Jet was put into when he was arrested. Now, of course, she doesn't know his name was Jet, but, she reflects back on that moment and kind of realizes, what's going on here? So yeah, it's time for her to go. As she's put into the back of the carriage, we get a look inside and we see that a face peeks out, pale and young. There are other shadows in there. how many more girls will they be taking up? How many servants could they possibly need to wait on them? So we see that like the carriage is just kind of filled with girls. Why so specific? What's going on here? Why specifically pointing out the connection with like the government? And immediately for me, I was connecting the dots and stuff like that to, well, Jude E Project. This makes complete sense, as this is where they get all those girls from to eventually kind of go and brainwash. And has Susu, to protect her family, been forced to take this kind of crazy contract in the upper ring, not knowing initially kind of what it was going to be. And we'll see how this pans out as we go forward, but it's definitely, I think, leaning you in that direction even at this early point. So yes, she says goodbye to her mother, her grandmother, says goodbye to baby Ming and Jin. They all call out to her, you know, we'll get you back, we'll do what we can to get you back. And the chapter just ends with the note of, my best friend is gone. I think a really good ending to the kind of intro section of the book. It is not the end of part one, interestingly. I think they almost could have done this as part one, as just the intro, but no, it's not. Part one continues a little bit more. But that's the idea of like what we've known since the first part of the book. Jin and Susu. Susu's now gone. What is Jin going to do next? This chapter very much addressed the idea that she doesn't really have any capacity to do anything to help her. So what is next for her? It obviously puts more pressure on the Wen family, because now they're down a person who would help with deliveries and stuff like that. It puts pressure on Jin all the more, because again, someone really important to her life is gone. What's next? What gives her any hope that they can actually like fix things here? That's the big question after this one. But yeah, I think this is probably one of the best, if not the best, chapters in the first kind of section of the book. I just think it covers a lot of ground where you get the core plot details of just Jin, Susu, you know, being taken away, but a lot of the backstory stuff, like the first mention of the judge, who will come up later on in the book, and we'll get details on that. You know, covering the idea that like these contracts for the upper ring are a known thing, and it's known that like you're not really meant to take them unless you are desperate, which is what this situation is. But then the backstory section in the middle about, you know, covering the whole Firelight Fountain and the updated details for this book, going more into like for the first time really mentioning like the mother here, but finding out what happened to her, and even just the little details about like more on Jin and school, Gong Gong's feeling on her earthbending. It presents a lot of details where like as we go forward, Jin does have a lot of skills in various areas. It's just, where does she focus her attention to kind of get the best out of them to achieve the most? And now she's caught between a lot of worlds, kind of, in a way, is the idea. So in the comments, let me know what your thoughts were on chapter 6, but we'll be back to cover the rest of the book, obviously once the book is officially released everywhere. Now there obviously isn't really going to be much of a delay, but you know, like I said, I wanted to get these first 6 out kind of pre-release as the intro to the book, so everyone has a sense for like what exactly this book is doing, and then we can really jump into the kind of meat of the book when it's officially released for everyone. And you know, like for me, I'll have the audio book so I can address like some of the pronunciation stuff as we go forward. So there is still stuff to be gained from the official release, obviously. So yeah, in the comments, let me know what your thoughts are on chapter 6, but that's been the video. Thanks for watching, and bye.